by me speaking about my health and my health journey and all of the things I've experienced over the last 30 years, even I didn't know I had FASD until 2 years ago, um, raises awareness. And ultimately, my goal isn't fame and fortune. My goal is to have an impact. And
Yeah.
if me talking about my health journey has an impact on even one person,
Yeah.
then the whole journey will have been worthwhile.
Welcome back to another episode of Living with FASD. This is Patti Kasper, your host, and I am so thrilled to be joined at the mic again today by Carl Young, a good friend and fellow self-advocate. Yeah, Carl, I'm so glad. We've been trying to coordinate our schedules to make this happen again. And of course, you were just at the FASD conference in Seattle. And there's a
Yes.
topic they've been discussing that I've just been itching to bring onto the podcast. So I'm going to rely on you, since I was not fortunate enough to be there, to share with the audience everything that you learned about FASD across the lifespan, but especially aging, right? FASD
Yes.
and aging. Yeah. Because, it's getting close. It's getting
Yeah.
real.
It, and that's quite frankly the truth. It was exhilarating, liberating, so many things. I spent probably 95% of my time in what they call the stream. It's where all of the adults and everybody over 17 with FASD
Uh-huh.
were. Being and spending all of that time in that stream was eye-opening. I wasn't wearing a mask. I was just being Carl,
Yeah.
which, I mean, everybody sees a different version of me based on my role in their world. I'm
Yeah.
a different kind of person when I'm on a board of directors versus when I go to the clinic for my health stuff versus when I go and present policy stuff at the legislature. Those are all distinct,
Yeah.
almost personalities, if you will. And I don't have a multiple personality disorder by any means. I don't pretend to know what that's
Yep.
like, but
Yeah.
that's the reality of the way my brain works.
Well, but it's also just reflecting the fact that we have different relationships with people. So everyone's experience with us is different depending on the nature of the relationship and the role that
Correct.
we're playing.
Yeah.
So, Patty, the social worker, is different than Patty, the former therapist,
Hmm.
is different from Patty, the coach, Patty,
Oh,
the
yeah.
hospice chaplain,
Yeah.
you know.
And when I put on my systems management hat and do an IT consult for somebody like I used to do, that's a whole nother thing. So,
Mhm.
it was profound to see it in myself
Yeah.
and to feel how free I was while I was within the stream. And
Mhm.
then to go and I presented two separate talks and I was on two different panels. And we'll talk about the aging one because that was one of my panels. But as soon as I walked out of the area where all of the FASD folks were and went into where the researchers and the parents were, I
Mm,
became somebody else, if that
mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
And
I
it
read
was
that
weird
people
to
kept
note.
calling you Dr. Young.
Yes, like, you know, and it stopped correcting people and just said, "My name is Carl, ask
Yeah,
me your questions. I don't mind.
yeah.
That's why I'm here. Ask all the questions you want." And it wasn't to mislead anybody. It's just because no matter how many times I said I'm not a doctor, people still ask me, Dr. Young can ask you a question,
I keep getting emails or invitations from people on LinkedIn, Dr. Casper. And I'm like, no,
right? Yeah, like, yeah,
not
would it be
there.
nice? Yes, but is it
Lord
going to be,
knows I have more than
you
enough
know?
college credits, but no.
Well, and that's the thing, and I had one of the researchers, because we met with them about aging, and we'll talk about that too, and I told him, I said, I'm just a dissertation away from a PhD. And he said, well, getting that piece of paper can be rather anticlimactic, and you have a lot of knowledge
Yeah.
that you would have acquired getting a dissertation. So he said, don't discount what you know. So, and we all have knowledge and we all have a
Yeah.
breadth of experience, and what we do with that is what matters. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how many degrees we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes. So, aging, we had this magical conversation about aging. And I was the oldest person, I think, in the FASD stream, which is neither here nor there. I was accepted. That's the number one thing. But in the aging panel, we talked about health outcomes because that was one of the focuses of the conference. And I kept, I mentioned, I've been sick for literally half my life,
Yeah.
almost 3 decades. And I said, I have illnesses that nobody can explain how I have illness. And I'm like, I have this thing called mesenteric paniculitis. So what's that? It impacts the connective tissues of all your internal organs in the proper position. How did you
Oh,
get that? No idea. And nobody can explain it. And so it comes back to, in my view, that in every other illness I have is the brain is literally, and I think a lot of people discount how much the brain is impacting your physical health. And
mhm.
in an FASD brain, it's amplified.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing in the literature, every health outcome you can imagine in somebody with an FASD is amplified.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be that mine is a lot more amplified than others.
Yeah.
So, somebody might have a stronger deficit in cognitive ability versus what I have, because I'm, fairly articulate, and not everybody with FASD is able to talk on the length that you and I are talking. And that's okay, but they don't have all of the health issues that I have.
Yeah.
So where I was given a benefit, I also have deficit because of
Yeah.
my health issues.
Yeah.
So I came home, it was after midnight last Thursday, 23rd, when I finally got home. And today's the 27th, and I'm in recovery period
Yeah.
because my body is just
Still.
like, you've had a
Yeah.
lot, it's time to relax.
Yeah.
So, but it was fascinating because there was 4 of us on the panel talking about aging, and I was the only man.
Mhm.
And all of us were impacted in some way.
Who were I'm curious, who were the other panelists?
Emily Hargrove was one, CJ Lutke was one,
Mhm.
and I want to say Maggie May, but I don't remember. I don't remember the fourth one off the top of my head. It's not one of my usual partners for a panel, so
Yeah.
I don't remember. But
I'm just feeling old listening
right?
listening to that, thinking they're old enough to be on a panel about aging.
Oh yeah, and they're
Makes
all,
me feel ancient.
Emily and CJ both have kids. So, and I have 5 kids. So my
Yeah.
kids are all adults and grown.
Yeah.
But, and they
And I'm
talked
a
about that.
great-grandmother.
Well, I'm sure your kids say you're a great grandma
No, no, well, that too, but yeah, one of the grands has a 2-year-old already.
already. But grandkids are the gift you didn't know you needed, because they make me feel young. Even
Yeah.
with my arthritic knees and my replaced knee, I'll still get down on the floor and play with them. So,
Yeah.
that's just the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I would if they weren't 2,000 miles away.
No,
Well, of course,
no.
all my grandkids are adults at this point, so yeah.
Well,
Ugh.
what do you do?
How did that happen?
It's called aging.
Well, here's the funny thing about that. The concept of self is ageless.
Yes.
So in that sense, our bodies will never keep up with our minds.
Correct. I mean, mentally, I'm probably a 12-year-old. My mind thinks I might be 25, and physically, my body's like, you're probably closer to 90.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you take the good, you take the bad.
Yeah.
It is just what it is. But we had an hour-long talk where with our panel, and then we had just a few brief moments for questions because we went
Mm.
long. And they always have the flagger with the time limit sign. You have 5 minutes, you have 3 minutes, you've
Mhm.
talked enough, it's time to go. I don't know that was a sign, but that was implied because she was frantic with her signs. I'm like, you're not landing on an aircraft carrier here. So, but it was
Well,
it
thank
was
goodness
fan
whoever that is not in charge of my podcast.
yeah, but it was fantastic because for a brief hour, we were able to be open and candid,
Yeah.
without studying long-term health outcomes. As the population with FASD continues to grow in
Mhm.
prevalence and age at the same time, we're going to have to deal with a society of a very significant issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we're not addressing that. It's going to impact costs medically. It's going to
Yeah.
impact healthcare costs for all of us. I'm on Medicare for disability, and people think Medicare is a free ride. And I have copays, I have premiums, I have all of those things.
Mhm.
So, but the perspective from the ladies was significant. Because like Emily mentioned, when she was pregnant, her health improved. She thinks it's because of all the health, all the hormones rolling through her
Mhm.
body, and we talked about pain tolerance. I'm allergic to opioid-based painkillers, so I can't take anything really stronger than OTC meds. And I went
Yeah.
through 2 joint replacements taking nothing more than Aleve,
Yeah.
but my pain
Yeah.
thresholds are here, and the average person is probably here. So,
Yeah. Yeah. My
and that
my body does not like opioids at all.
no,
No,
right.
when I had my cancer surgery almost 10 years ago, they gut me like a fish. I mean,
Mhm,
literally cut me from just above the pubic bone to just below my sternum.
mhm.
And healing from that, I mean, the last thing you want to do when you've been ripped open like that is throw up.
Yes. Like,
That
I
and
can't
laugh.
imagine.
You don't want to
Yeah,
laugh either,
yeah, yeah. I
but
can't imagine.
it's hell. So, what works best for me pain wise, but it's expensive. So, hospitals don't want to give it is IV Tylenol.
Yeah,
That
I could
stuff
see
is a
that.
miracle.
Yeah, I could see that.
And it's not a narcotic and it's not a
Yeah.
steroid,
You know,
but impossible to get unless you're an inpatient.
oh, and that's just the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah.
We want to give so many things for pain relief, but not everything works for pain relief. And
Yeah.
some of the stuff that worked really well made your heart explode and they took it off the market. You know, I miss the days of Vioxx and Celebrex because that helped me manage the
Well, I
pain in
still
my
take
body.
Celebrex. I still
You know,
take Celebrex for my arthritis. I wouldn't
yeah.
be able to turn my head or cross my legs without it.
Yeah. My doctor won't, no, she's like, no, we're not going to risk you being
I
allergic to that too.
Yeah, I took myself off it because I was concerned about my liver and my kidneys, and my heart doctor said, "No, you're going back on that because you will damage your organs much more taking OTCs multiple
Yes.
times a day."
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, Vioxx was a good drug.
Yes, but yeah, that was that minor issue with the heart valves and them just kind of
Who
rupturing
needs
because
those?
yeah, so, but, but that was a long time ago. That was what
Yeah,
25 years ago.
more than that.
That's been off the market. So
More than that. It's been off the market since
because I first started taking that when I was first diagnosed with lupus.
yeah, I started taking Vioxx in 98.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
I
think it
started it in
was I only
'99.
took it for like a year, maybe I think a year, and then they switched me to something else which was also pulled. And then Celebrex is the last one in that category of drugs, and it's
Right.
still on the market, but
Yeah, it's a prescription based now.
yeah.
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 So, but it was incredible just having the candid conversation, the
Mhm.
four of us up there speaking freely and
Yeah.
frankly about our health,
Yeah.
and I talked about how, I went probably 8 or 10 years from my first diagnosis to my second,
Mhm.
and now they're exponentially increasing the older I get. So, I go roughly 18 months to 2 years at the most between new and fresh diagnoses. And it's always some bizarre illness that nobody can explain how I got, you know.
What was that last one
It
with
was some,
the first one you mentioned?
the mesenteric paniculitis.
So here's my wild guess.
Uh-huh.
Let me see how it lands for you. I've been doing a lot of reading about how the fascia that connects our organs goes between the organs, and the fascia being that
Yep.
layer of fat,
Yes.
right? That surrounds each organ and kind of connects them is actually a lot of water moves through that fascia and it's part of our body's electrical system.
Hmm.
So if that gets screwed up from prenatal alcohol exposure, could that be the source
Oh, it could be.
of this bizarre rare disease that has come up for you?
Yeah. And the most very recent one that I was diagnosed with last fall is autonomic dysfunction. Means
Okay.
I get dizzy and fall down a lot. It's not
I
POTS. They said it's not severe enough to be POTS,
Yeah,
but that's what
but that's
happens.
hell.
It
That's
is,
hell. I mean, I woke up this morning out of nowhere
right,
with vertigo. I mean,
right.
so severe I couldn't even roll over in bed without waves of nausea. And of course, my
Yeah,
husband's gone to work at that point, and the dogs don't understand. Why can't we go out? We got to pee.
right. No, and I've been dizzy for most of 3 days now.
Oh,
And but I'm kind of used to it because I also have long nerve neuropathy, so I can't feel my feet. So that's part of why I'm off balance all the time. That coupled
Mhm.
with the dysfunction
Yeah.
just makes things 10 times worse. So I have
Yeah.
when I'm out and about traveling, I have a walker. We call it the Rollinator. But
Yeah.
in Seattle, we changed its name to the electrical conductor because there's something about the carpet there, and I would be moving along and somebody go to shake my hand and I would shock them. Yeah. So, yeah, here
Oh,
I am
you're
with my
such a
conductor.
lively guy to have around, huh?
So it got
Sparky,
so
good to
bad.
see you.
I had to ground myself on tables and stuff so I wouldn't shock everybody I came into contact with.
You should
But
call it Sparky.
yeah, and it's fire engine red. So,
There you
but
go.
yeah. So, but it was it was profound to be able to have that conversation, and we didn't plan anything we said prior to
Yeah.
starting the panel.
Well,
It was
kinda
just
like
kind
the
of a
the
free
today's
form.
conversation is totally free
Yeah,
form. Yeah.
right. But I talked about the journey, and somebody later asked me how I can speak so freely about such personal things.
Mhm.
And I said, well, a lot of it is I was raised in a world where we didn't talk about anything ever, and you just bottle it up. And that doesn't help anything. In
No.
fact, it can make you ill.
Yes.
So I said, part of it is self preservation. But the biggest part is by me speaking about my health and my health journey and all of the things I've experienced over the last 30 years, even, I didn't know I had FASD until 2 years ago, um, raises awareness.
Mhm.
And ultimately, my goal isn't fame and fortune. My goal is to have an impact. And
Yeah.
if me talking about my health journey has an impact on even one person,
Yeah.
then the whole journey will have been worthwhile. So, there were a number of different talks on aging itself, but I didn't get to be in a lot of those because I was in the stream. And to me, the stream was significant simply because of all of the communication that happened
Yeah.
with people who never felt heard,
Yeah.
never felt seen. All of a sudden, they're in a room with 35 other people and everybody sees them
Yeah.
and
Is
there's
that
no
is that
judgment.
all that were there was 35?
Yeah, they usually have more, but with the
Attendance
state
was
of,
down this year.
yeah, because of the
Yeah.
state of the world and the economy, the attendance was
And
down.
all the
Yeah,
muck with the airports and the
yeah,
airlines and canceled flights and wacky
everything. Yeah,
weather.
and wacky weather. We're
Yeah,
on 10th or 11th winter here in North Dakota.
I know.
You know,
It snowed yesterday morning, late morning. It was like a serious snowstorm.
Mhm.
And then 2 hours later, it was all gone. The grass
Yes,
was green, and it looked like it was gonna be a beautiful afternoon, and then it was snowing again last night.
right.
There was snow this morning. It's gone. Can't
Yep.
make up its mind.
This is weather in North Dakota, otherwise
Yeah.
known as wind.
Right? Yeah, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But I think ultimately, I'd like to see them do something about aging
Yeah,
every year
yeah,
because it changes, and it's not because everybody's
yeah,
reading the literature. It's just it changes in each of us. And we never know from year to year how our health will be
yeah,
impacted or what new things are going to
yeah.
crop up and all of those things.
Well, I think there's a couple different ways of looking at that because we have to look at it, our adaptive functioning too.
Yes, we do.
And so it changes over time because we become more familiar, more mindful of
Hmm.
how we respond to things, and we get better systems put into place. And
Correct.
then we find that we're struggling with something else.
Correct.
And so that landscape is constantly changing. But
Mhm.
yeah, health wise, I mean, you talk about your diagnostic physician saying to you, your body will suffer the ramifications of aging at a much younger age.
Yes. Yeah, and I've been told that by more than one doctor.
Yeah.
You're aging faster than I would consider typical for a 54-year-old man. Well, what does that mean?
I, aside from short telomeres, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Cutting a
mean, is
cloth.
that a thing? Have they found that to be true that our telomeres are shorter?
I don't know that they've studied that specifically, but
They
we
need
did
to.
talk about that.
Yeah.
We did talk about that. And I was candid in that regard. I'm like, My doctors, a couple of different doctors have told me we don't typically see this kind of joint damage in somebody you're as young as you who's
Mhm.
not either been active in the outdoors, working in heavy construction, or doing some other
Yeah.
high profile work like stuntman. It's like I've never been a stuntman. I did a lot of crazy things in my childhood, as a teen, but I've never done anything like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Sparky,
but
you're just being modest. I'm sure you've done some
right.
crazy stuff.
Yeah, yeah, hold my soda and watch this. Let's see how far we can get the car to fly. I did that a number of times as a teenager, but I haven't
Yeah.
done it since then.
What, you were inspired by Dukes of Hazzard?
Oh, exactly. That was a childhood favorite. You know, Smokey and the Bandit jumping in
Yep.
the bridge that was out over the riverbank, getting away from the sheriff. Yeah, we did that.
We're dating ourselves.
Yeah, we are. So, but it's a significant conversation to
Yeah.
continue to have,
Yeah.
because we live with this every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And most of the researchers will never, until they're much older and
Yeah.
probably retirement,
Yeah.
experience the health issues that even a portion of us with FASD will have.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have parallel conversations in the type 1 diabetic community. I've had type 1 diabetes for over 60 years at this point.
Hmm.
There's not a whole lot of people. I mean, my parents were told I wouldn't live past 8.
Oh, yeah.
I'm well past that expiration date, but the point is we are now getting to the age where, we're old enough to have been blessed to be able to have insulin.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
because before insulin was around, it was a death sentence. But now we're getting to the point where more and more and more of us are getting to the age of retirement communities, nursing homes. And I have it in my advanced directives that if I'm not cognizant enough, and bear in mind, if you have FASD, you have a 209 increased fold risk of dementia.
Yes, you do.
If I'm not cognizant enough to manage my diabetes, withdraw all life-saving medication, and that includes the insulin,
Hmm.
because I don't want someone who's not trained in type 1, which is most of the medical community, because we're a small portion, and we're just like 10% of all diabetics. I don't want a nurse killing me by accident because she's treating me like a type 2.
Yeah.
And
Right.
if I can't maintain that, I mean, but we're getting to that place where it's a brand new problem for people. It's a brand new problem. What are they going to do? As more of us get to that age and more of us live with those vulnerabilities. And so the same thing with FASD
Hmm.
and because our strengths and our challenges are all so diverse.
Yes, they are. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
We talked about, because they had a machine in the booths, the exhibit hall, that where you could do a face scan, 3D face scan. And what they're looking for is to catalog as many people as they can to see if there's commonalities and minimal
Mm.
exposure for facial features, because less than 10% of the population has the feature set,
And
even
if
though
you're not
that's
a
what.
child, it's not gonna show up anyway.
Right.
This is not
That's
my baby face.
No, and that's what most people look at when they think FASD. They think there's somebody's got a full feature set,
Yeah,
and most of us don't have that feature set.
right.
I can think of maybe 2 or 3 people in the whole stream that had any of the features, and they didn't have them all, you know,
Mhm.
but that's how they categorize us is, "Well, you don't look like
Yeah.
you have FASD." Well, what does that look like exactly? Can you define
Right?
that for me?
Just
So
like, "Well, you don't look like a diabetic."
right,
There's a look? Is that a
you know
red tip cane? What I mean,
there's no metal hat protruding from the top of your head, so what's the
yeah,
deal?
yeah,
But but we were very candid in
yeah,
our discussions. We got, we didn't, I wouldn't say we got a lot of applause, but people paid attention to what we were saying. And the room was full. It was in the
yeah.
biggest conference room, so there is room for probably 380 people, and we didn't have a lot of empty chairs. So but we were mindful of our time too, and
Yeah.
trying to keep on track.
So what
So
kind of questions were you getting from the researchers?
the biggest things are, what would you want somebody else to know about your health and your FASD both? Like, I have FASD. I am not. FASD was my thing. And the other thing is, you can't put us all in a box because we're all unique individuals.
Yeah.
Um,
I think none of us are in the box. Come on.
right. Well, and exactly, there's the umbrella FASD diagnosis and then the subsets. And, you could put 20 of us in a room and none of us are going to have the same symptoms.
Right.
Even if we have similar health outcomes, we're still not going to have the same symptoms. And somebody might have some, like EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know that I have, but I don't know that I've ever been tested for it either. And somebody else might have bad hip joints, and that would be the only joint that's impacted. You just never know.
Because that's the joint that was being formed
Yeah,
when there was a drink.
exactly. Yeah. So who knows? But
Yeah.
the other thing that we talked about, because somebody made a comment after the panel ended and said, what would you want your mom to know? It's not your fault, mom. If I don't blame my mom for my having FASD, then nobody else gets to blame her either.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
as simple as that. But I think everybody walked away with a little better awareness of aging in
Mhm.
FASD. I think the youngest one on the panel was 30, and then I was the oldest at 54. There was a different panel that Gina took part in. I forget her last name.
Shoemaker.
Yeah, there you go. But that was one on parenting, so that was a little different. But it was very insightful, and I did go to 2 talks briefly, because I was on my way back to the stream with all of the FASD folks, and what I heard was interesting. They are looking at commonalities in aging,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't get into the very specifics or the weeds of what they're looking at. It was more of a top level approach. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because, time is limited at a
Yeah.
conference like this to get into
Yeah.
all of the body of research and
Was
knowledge
there
that
was
they've
there
gained.
anyone talking about the connection with dementia?
No, not that I
It's a
can
shame.
remember. And that would be an interesting conversation to have because,
That's
you
one
know,
reason why I wanted so badly to be there this year. Aside from missing out on giving the talk that Jody and I had lined up
yeah,
and had been accepted, I'm still so disappointed we couldn't participate virtually.
mhm,
Um, 'Cause doggone, it was a good talk.
right? Well,
But I really wanted to be there because I have that chapter in my book in
yeah,
Sip by Sip. It was a call to action to researchers. It's one thing, and the stream is the genesis of the ALC, the
yes.
Adult
And I'm a
Leadership
member of
Collaboration.
the,
Yeah,
I'm on
yeah.
the ALC.
It was that lunchtime cohort discussion about our bodies falling apart, that got that whole lay of the land survey going, got the formalization of the ALC together. But it, it's one thing to say you have a 209 times increased risk of early onset dementia, but
Yeah,
there wasn't anyone on the committee at that point, the collaboration, to realize, wait a minute, there's more than one kind of dementia. This is
yes.
an important thing to tease out. And I'm hypersensitive to that because of my mom and having to care for her with her Lewy body. But I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is the perfect time to really tease it out. There's so many symptoms in common, so many characteristics in common between FASD and Lewy body.
Well, when my father just passed from dementia,
Mhm.
um, and I approached every conversation with him through a neurodevelopmental lens. And unlike other people who tried to communicate with him, I was fairly successful. And I never argued with him. I listened to his stories and I took notes on some stories that I'd never heard before so that when he would bring them up again, I could relate to what he was talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where he was like, "Were you there in '61 when we went custom combining?" Or he would say, "Do you remember when we went custom combining in '61?" And rather than saying, "No, I wasn't alive yet," I would say, "Oh, yes. Do you remember what truck we drove, Dad?"
Yeah.
And he would tell you, it's a 1948 Ford flatbed. And then he'd say, "We had the chase car was the '52 DeSoto."
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that was such a brilliant thing for you to have done, and
Mhm.
I really initially resisted the advice to join in on my mom's reality when she
Mhm.
would be in a kind of altered state, but it really is it's about where they are and helping them be comfortable. It's got nothing to do with reality.
No.
So and so it's not a lie, it's just being present.
Well, and that was the thing, and even the staff were like, "How do you do that?" Like, if you want to know how to communicate with him, talk tractors. You have to know nothing, absolutely nothing about tractors. He'll tell you
Yeah.
everything you want to know. But
And more so.
what was your favorite tractor rally? And
Yeah.
he'll tell you all about it. And you
Yeah.
then, with when he and I in one of our last conversations was that simple. We were talking about 1958 John Deere's or 730 propane, which was his favorite tractor. And it took him probably 25 minutes, and then he recognized me. And he's like, "Oh, how you doing, Carl? When did you get here?" "Well,
Yeah.
Dad, I just got here. I don't know."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that was just the way it went. But I was also the very last person he ever spoke to. So, and I take meaning from that. So,
Yeah.
but the knowing and seeing what he went through with his dementia
Mhm.
and knowing how my brain works based on all of my reading and what I learned during the conference, I could see where there's a connection. And I think the connection is significant and needs to
Yeah.
be studied a lot more than it is.
Well,
So,
in simplistic terms, it seems to me to be logical
mhm,
that we would have such an increased risk of dementia because what is dementia? It's memory access issues
correct.
more
Yeah.
than anything else. I mean, it's an oversimplification, but that's what it is.
Hmm.
And what's one of the most common struggles people with FASD has? It has to do with proper filing away, storing and retrieval of memory.
Well, and
You
you could
know,
look at confabulation, you could look at
yeah,
perseveration, and I
yeah.
did a talk on perseveration and getting stuck in the mental loop.
How'd that
And
go?
oh, it went fantastic. And all of the parents are like, because I called it, when somebody breaks out of that loop, it's like a mental explosion that they're finally able to release. And I said, you
Mhm.
cannot logic your way out of a
Yeah,
perseverative loop. No amount of logic from you as a caregiver will impact
yeah.
them in getting them out of that step. And the same was with my father and his dementia. You could
Mhm.
argue logic all day long and it would have zero impact on
Yeah,
him other than to upset him.
yeah.
And if your goal is to upset somebody who's struggling with that mental loop, then the best way to get that goal is to apply logic. If
Mhm.
you want to just have a conversation and calm things down,
Well,
move
applying
away from
logic
logic,
yeah, applying logic turns it into a power struggle,
Yeah, and nobody
you
ever
know?
wins a power struggle.
No, no.
No matter
I
who thinks
I
they won.
remember one time my
Yeah.
mom was having a hallucination. There's an imaginary friend that she had when we were living in California. I've not heard any mention of him since we moved to North Dakota a year and a half ago. What was his name? I think it was William. I mean, we don't have any relatives with that name. Who knows where it came from? But she would look up at the ceiling and be having, laying in her hospital bed, looking at the ceiling and having this conversation with William. And I'm like, well, what's he doing? Because sometimes she'd play Sudoku. She'd be able to see a Sudoku grid on the ceiling and she'd be playing it in her mind. And I'm like, is he helping you with that? Is he
No,
helping you win? And she's like, no. And I said, well, what good is he?
right. Exactly.
Got
Yeah.
her laughing and brought her. And that,
And those are what I would call the humanizing moments.
yeah.
Because in dementia, like some aspects of FASD, is very hard to deal with. And it's harder on the families than it is usually
Oh,
on the
yeah.
individual.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
For sure.
but to see the magic that occurs when you can get two people with the same condition to come
Mhm.
together and have like a meeting of the minds is
Yeah.
just incredible. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the first night of the stream, we had a briefly, everybody was silent. And then all of a sudden we had magic tricks and we had people walking around on their hands and everybody was talking and laughing and
Yeah.
it was normal, you know? And I don't know. There's a lot of people, I think, with FASD who never get to experience that.
For me, that was summer camp or diabetic camp as a kid in the summertime.
Yeah.
That week was more important than Christmas, more
Well,
important than birthdays. I mean, it was magical because it was the only time I was normal. And yeah, so I really want to go to one of these conferences so that I can re-experience that magic because it
it
truly is
was, you
magical.
know, magical is the best word. I
Yeah,
mean, the
truly.
ALC met with a staff member from FASD United for like 3 months weekly, planning what we were going to do in Seattle. And without that person, I don't think the events would have been as successful as they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
because they were really our rock in the storm. I think we could have navigated it just fine without them, but they were like a liaison between us and the rest of the conference. And that was just incredible,
Yeah.
you know. And they, no judgment, they embraced everybody just the way they were as they presented at that moment in time. And there was no limitations, you
Yeah.
know, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Let's just play along. And by and large, everybody thought the food that we were fed was fantastic.
Good.
So, you know, but you know, it's the important things. You know?
Right? Supply food and they will come.
Well, you know, and that's the thing, you know. But the biggest thing, even within the aging, when we did talk about the aging, is there was no judgment from anybody in the audience
Yeah.
towards us on the panel and the things we talked
Yeah.
about. And we were quite frank in what we were talking about, you know. We talked about cycles and monthly cycles, and I talked about this and I talked about that.
Did you talk
And
about your lunar cycles
yes,
as a guy? Right?
yes, you know, like
It's reality.
I can tell you when the moon is
Guys
going to
have
vote me,
lunar cycles.
you know. I don't have to be outside to tell you what cycle the moon is in.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I talked about how the weather impacts me, and
Yeah.
I talked about, you know, the stress of sitting on the tarmac for 2.5 hours on a
Oh,
neurotypical person. And I said it was like tenfold for me, I think.
yeah.
I don't know what the guy next to me was feeling, but I know how I felt. And I wanted to get out of the plane. You know, that was just our reality. But, and then the other thing that occurred is after the conference is over, the ALC got to meet with the research team from CIF ASD, Collaborative of Investigations for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, I think is what it's called. But there's about 30 researchers in this room. And then Tom Donaldson from FASD United, and then the four of us from the ALC that represented ALC at the conference were there.
Yeah.
And they said, what do you think we should study next?
See, I would have given
And
anything to be part of that conversation.
and we talked, you know, we all hit aging.
Yeah.
You need to research health outcomes, period. And I had presented a paper on the what we call the translation support provider, where you introduce a third party to the probation relationship between justice and the person that was in trouble, so that they can each understand what the other person is thinking and not
Yeah.
thinking, and how they're understanding concepts and all of that.
Yeah.
And I introduced that. And somebody said, well, we have 3 people researching in criminal justice. Are you willing to collaborate with them? Yeah. You know,
Silly question.
well, and that's the thing, you know, it went beyond aging because, you know,
Yeah.
when you're involved in the justice system, that puts stress on your bodies
Oh,
that
yeah. Can trigger
exasperates
everything else.
everything, you know, triggers your FASD, triggers your loops and your mind loops and your health
Yeah.
issues and everything else.
And when you're living in confined spaces that
Right.
are very, very regimented in how much and what kind of movement you can get, I mean, that really deteriorates your physical condition.
Right. You know, and if you're struggling with housing, that is going to impact you. That's going to raise your cortisol levels, your stress levels, and all of that. And it's going to impact your health. And
Yeah.
that's going to impact your health, your aging outcomes, and all of those things.
Yeah.
So everything literally is interconnected to aging. So by studying these, what you think might be something minor or what other people might be something minor can eventually have an impact on aging. So, we need to talk more about aging, and we need to make it acceptable to talk about aging. There's no shame in getting older.
That's why I
Everybody's
don't
going to
die
experience it,
anything. These are wisdom highlights, y'all.
right? Yeah, everybody's going to
I've earned
experience
these.
aging at some point, Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not something you can escape from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
So I want to know, the ALC did this wonderful survey, right? And found all these 428 comorbid conditions,
Yes. I
physical
think that was
conditions.
found somewhere else, but they expanded on it greatly. Yes.
So, but they found all these, and I know in my book when I went through the list because I bought the big book that it's published in.
Yes.
And I went through and identified everything that, hits for me. And there were a lot of
Same here.
things that I hadn't realized were like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
And I know that because they're very clear, this is a survey. It's a research survey. It is not a
Correct.
research study.
Correct.
And I know that there have been a lot of studies that have started because of the survey, but how can we follow up on which conditions are now being studied? Who's doing it? What is the outcome of those studies? Is anyone tracking that?
Well,
And we've really dropped the ball then.
Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just outside my
but
wheelbase.
if no one's tracking it, then we've really dropped the ball, haven't we?
I would think so, yes.
We need to pick those threads back up again and get back to weaving this beautiful,
Tapestry.
tapestry. Yeah. That is the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Well, we have a
Great
shared
minds
brain.
think alike.
Exactly, but in the
Different but alike.
the one, and the key thing that we wanted them to take away wasn't just what to research next. It's that FASD needs to be taught in medical schools.
Yes.
More than 15 minutes.
Yes.
Or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm using 15 minutes as an arbitrary number, but it needs to be talked about extensively in schools, in medical schools specifically, to the point where I think if they could find people from the FASD community to come and talk briefly about their own health and their own journey, it would have an impact on doctors.
They're doing that in Australia, aren't they?
Yes, they are. No. Yes, they are. Yeah. But why aren't we doing that in other places? So I don't know. I hope that the aging conversation continues. It needs to continue. The other thing that was a question that I asked specifically during our talk with the researchers, I said, are there any active studies of the COVID generation? And we didn't know. And if they did know, they didn't say. And that's not a bad on them. But because there might very well be researchers somewhere studying it. Because we have a whole generation or, a whole cohort of people who were locked down in their houses, who were born during that period when one of the few places that was actively open.
Kindergarten and first grade.
Right. And during COVID, they didn't shut down the liquor stores.
And alcohol sales went up by 40%. Women drinking went up by 50%. Yeah. And all these kids are being diagnosed with autism and ADHD because that's all the school psychologists seem to know about.
Right. Exactly.
And because of the scattered findings, on the rare occasion, the 2% of kids that get assessed, they get the scattered findings, and so they're either misdiagnosed, partially diagnosed, or dismissed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're doing a disservice. We're not, we're doing a disservice to kids that actually do have autism. We're doing a disservice to the kids who don't have autism but have FASD. We're doing a disservice to the people who support both populations.
Yes.
In those areas where you can get support for FASD. And, we said that too. To assume supports for autism work for people with FASD is a significant error, because there's so many, like my son, Mark, and I talk to him because I talked about him in Seattle. I talked to him on Saturday. And he said, I know you were at that conference. Did you get to talk about me, tell our story? And I said, oh, all the time. But he said, I remember when they had somebody come up from the city to get me, and it's like an hour from the capital of Bismarck, where we live now, to where we used to live. And they would send a staff member up, and they'd spend 2 or 3 hours with him and take him out of the home. And it was supposed to work on skill sets, ABA type therapy. And the only thing that ever did for either our son or ourselves or the rest of the family was give us a break from each other.
Which in itself has some value.
Which it does, yes.
Yeah.
But it's also expensive to do ABA therapy. And it doesn't work with every population. Heck, even in the autism population, they're going to tell you that some kids benefit from it and some kids don't.
And I'm just curious, the kids that it doesn't, are they actually both FASD and ASD? Or are they mistakenly diagnosed ASD and they're actually FASD?
That would be my guess. Yeah. Because if you can find a therapy that works, use it. But it might not work next week. And I hammered that point home a few times during the parenting panel. I raised my hand and I said, my purpose here is not to sell books. But I wrote a book with my friend and I said, we have all of these interventions. But I said, we're clear in the early chapter that an intervention that works today may not work tomorrow, may not work for 6 months. We never know. You have to keep trying. You have to have faith in your ability as a parent to find an intervention that works for right now and go with it until it doesn't work anymore. So I got quite a bit of applause from parents for saying that.
Yeah.
Because they struggle so much with finding
it normalizes their experience and it validates their worth as parents.
Right. Yeah. You're not crazy. You're living in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
But on top of that, your child is living in a difficult situation because they can't process everything that you want them to process, and I said, I didn't recognize that in myself until I was diagnosed. And then I saw all of the struggles that we had and how similar they were to my childhood.
Yeah.
So,
and that brings up another point because I've been, I've had this thing in the back of my mind for much of our conversation. We talk about aging and FASD. You and I, and, umpteen other people that we both know, discovered as adults in our middle age that we have FASD.
Right.
And before we just muddled our way through life. We did the best we could. How do I want to say this? I mean, there's so many questions that could explode out off of that platform, right? How have things changed for you in the way that you understand yourself, the way you're able to navigate life? What has that change been like for you?
I give myself a lot more grace than I used to. I allow myself those moments when I feel overwhelmed to step away from a situation and regroup. I don't ignore those times when I'm in sensory overload and look the other way, because they impact my health when I do that. I'm better about recognizing the need to stop and regroup, at least for me. But I think more than that, having the diagnosis has allowed me to forgive myself for some of the things I used to do long before I became a parent. And I wish that the people I had impacted would have the same grace, but they have to come to terms with it on their own.
Yeah.
Given my diagnosis.
They have to be willing to learn about it.
Yeah.
And to see if that softens their heart.
Well, and that's the thing. And the people that I knew then see me having this diagnosis and talking openly about it as me blaming my mom. And I don't hold any ill will towards mom. I actually am quite grateful that she chose to give me life because I'm able to voice things and talk about things on a level that most people are never comfortable with. And there's people that aren't comfortable hearing me speak about that either. But, like I said early on, if I'm not going to blame my mom for me having FASD, then you don't get to blame her either. That was in a time period where every doctor was telling mom it was okay to drink while she was pregnant. That was 1972. So, I know you're older than me, but that was the way things were.
Because my mom's pregnancy was 10 years before Ken Jones et al. Figured things out.
Go smoke your old gold 100s, have a glass of wine, and call it a night. And
I'm trying to
now,
think what she was smoking at the time was Pall
you
Mall.
know,
I
yeah,
think she was smoking Pall Malls at that point,
yeah,
non-filtered.
yeah, exactly. Mom's was old
Make
gold
my lungs hurt
100s,
just thinking about it.
right? Yeah. And I think
I
because they had a birth moms panel too, and I didn't sit in on that session. I thought it would be too
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
I think my mom would have volunteered to be on the birth moms panel.
yeah.
So,
See, and my mom's not, yeah, she's just not willing to touch it,
yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah, well, and
That's
that's just the
okay.
way it is.
Yeah.
But, mom would have, I think, she would have initially been upset, but I think she would have gotten past that when she saw the impact that it had.
Mm.
Not the alcohol consumption, but the way I am and how I interact with my
Mhm,
community and
mhm.
all of the advocacy work that I do, all of the policy work that I do,
Yeah.
all of the IEP work that I do.
Oh, how
She
could she
knows,
not be
you know,
proud? Yeah,
she knew that all of that had meaning,
yeah,
and that it was
yeah,
my life's work.
yeah,
And she said, you're building up to something. She told me that was about a year before she passed away. She
yeah,
said, I never, you're once a construction and truck driver. So to have you move into what you're doing now she said, I never would have thought that would happen.
yeah, yeah,
And I wouldn't have thought it either.
yeah. And, it really is the same kind of shift for me. When I was in first grade, that's when I realized not every kid has diabetes.
Right. Yeah.
And I came home and said, why me? And the only spiritual thing that's ever come out of my mom's mouth was because she's agnostic, bless her heart. She said, because God knew you could handle it and none of your friends could.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
shaped the way that I deal with adverse circumstances
Yeah.
for the rest of my life. It may take 3 days of me perseverating on what happened to find the blessing in it, to find that silver lining, but by
Yeah.
golly, I will find it.
Yeah.
And
There was a time when I would have never allowed myself this much movement in a conversation. Yeah. Thank you for giving me grace for that.
yeah,
But I find that I'm calmer when I can move around.
yeah, no worries.
Yeah. But we're
I
given the
got one of
gifts.
those exercise balls so that I could
Yeah.
do some core movement while I'm sitting at my desk.
Yep.
But because I had to go to physical therapy after they rebuilt my back, and they had a 78-inch exercise ball, which was perfect height for desk work. And I got so excited. This is going to be great. Because we tell teachers to let our kids sit on these in school, and I was really looking forward to it. But the Walmart version of a 78-inch ball is not 78 inches, and the desk would be like here. You get what
Well,
you pay for.
yes, that's the truth. Well, then if circling back to aging,
Yeah.
when you look at what we do to kids and taking away their recess
Oh,
because they're misbehaving,
don't get me started.
what we're actually seeing is symptoms,
Yeah.
is that ultimately having an impact on their health? Because
It's
you're
cruel.
forcing their brain to do certain things that
Yeah.
it needs the release from exercise in the recess period to do.
Yeah.
And I always argue that you should give them extra recess, not less. There's something going on. You need to release that. One of
Yeah.
those ways is to exercise. One of those ways is
Yeah.
to go outside and play.
Yeah.
Give them an extra recess. See how they respond.
And yet when parents say, go run 10 laps, up and down the block and, and then come back, and that's judged negatively.
Yeah.
It's deemed capital punishment or, corporate punishment. Forget that.
Mm.
It's dispelling all the stress.
Yeah, it is, and we talked about stress in the stream room, and I said, one of the things that I love to do is mow the lawn. And the same with my son. There's just something about the vibration of the handle
Yes.
that is relaxing to me, So if I could mow all day long every day, I would. Unfortunately, my health won't allow that,
Well, and the
But-
grass probably wouldn't be real happy either.
No, but I can find other lawns to mow.
Well, yeah, there you go. You keep your neighbors happy.
But that's
Earn some extra
significant.
money, Carl.
I told my wife, I said, worst case, because she's losing her job here in a couple of weeks.
Ugh,
Yeah.
that sucks.
Budget cuts. But I tell people, you have to find the release that works for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be lawn mowing. It could be painting.
Yeah.
It could be going into a room that's silent and just being. You could go into another space and just scream as loud as you can for as long as you can until
Yeah.
your voice goes away. But
Yeah.
whatever it is, and it will be unique for you,
Yeah.
and it won't be the same for everybody else.
Right.
But you
Right.
have to find that in you, because otherwise bottling this up all the time in everything that's going on in your brain will have an impact on your health. It would be interesting to study that,
It would. It
what
would.
kinds of releases are people with FASD getting the most benefit from, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how you would study something like that because it's subjective as heck, but
Yeah, you and I are so much alike in terms of outside the box thinkers, and we come up with all these ideas that need to be researched, but
oh
neither
yeah.
one of us are the ones to do the work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that was the thing with when I gave my criminal justice talk, I said, this is just a conceptual idea.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the research. These are the recommended hypotheses that I suggest you start with. And where you go from there is up to you.
Yeah.
I had judge, and two lawyers nodding their heads along with all of the parents that were in the back of the room.
That's
We
awesome.
need to do this. And then they're like, well, we could do this in schools.
Mm-hmm.
We could do this in healthcare. We could do this
Yeah.
here. We could do this there. All of the things.
Yeah.
And we can, it's not limited. And
Yeah.
what it is, not to get into the weeds, but if you've ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe about John Nash, it's his equilibrium theorem. It's economics, but it's economics applied at the human level and getting the system to change by breaking it in order to better support everybody. So, yeah, but it was
Well, that's no
phenomenal.
different than Deb Evenson telling teachers that say to her, I don't have time to invest all this energy into learning how to serve one kid differently.
You don't have time not to.
Exactly. And that's her
Yeah.
point. If you do this and apply these principles of interacting and supporting kids to
Mhm.
everybody, your job
Yeah.
will be easier.
Well, in those interventions for people with FASD, they can be used on anybody. You know, if
Yeah.
somebody's dysregulated, they're dysregulated. Find what works for them and
Yeah.
move forward. But too often we're taught a certain way and we think that's the only way.
Yeah. Because neurotypical kids get dysregulated.
Yes, they do.
If they don't feel good or they have a nightmare and they haven't slept,
Yep.
then they're going to be knocked off their equilibrium during the day if someone else looks at them cross-eyed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's life. It's
But
life.
if we could convince the system, healthcare providers too, to change their perspective on how they approach a given situation,
Mhm.
that has the potential for a strong outcome. A puppy. That was the thing I missed the most when I was in Seattle, is my puppies.
Yeah.
So I was down on the waterfront, and here comes this golden retriever wearing a yellow rain slicker. So I'm
My
like, I'm
my
like,
Aussie just opened the office door.
oh yeah. So I asked the guy, I said, your dog is so precious, can't take a picture. He said, you're not the first and you won't be the last. So I took a picture, and then he left with his dog. And a couple of seconds later, I hear, can I take a picture of you?
We were camping one time down somewhere down by San Diego, Escondido, I think. And it's kind of a wooded area in the foothills. And it was a rainy day, and there was this little old lady wearing a yellow slicker, yellow boots, yellow rain hat. Her dog had a yellow slicker, yellow
Yep.
boots,
Yep. Yep.
yellow hood.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
but one thing I'll say about pets is they're my therapy.
Yes.
When I'm dysregulated, my corgi is there to, just press against my leg and give
Yeah.
me some calming influence. When I'm not feeling my best, my Shih Tzu will jump up on my lap and look for cuddles.
Yeah.
And our other dog, which doesn't really have a breed, so we just call her Heinz, but her name is Loki, has a whole different perspective when I'm
Yeah.
off. Not feeling well. And it doesn't have to be a dog. It could be a cat,
Yeah.
I imagine somebody somewhere's got a bearded dragon that offers the same kind of support for them, but you never know.
My mom has a lot of therapy animals thanks to all our fur babies.
Yeah.
She's one of the cats, Lily, is pretty much glued to her side all day
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Duke is not old enough yet to serve as a good therapy dog because
Yeah.
he's at that age and stage where he loves to snuggle with you if you're laying down, but to get him to stop giving you wet willies.
Yeah. Right. I
Yeah.
don't want to. Yeah. No French kissing dog.
Yeah. My my mom, I can hear her in her room giggling, and then all of a sudden it's GTSOP.
Right.
Okay, she's had enough. Come here,
Yes.
Duke.
Yeah. But you know what, Dad and his dementia, that was one constant is people were always bringing their pets over to
Yeah.
see him because he was a dog
Yeah.
lover his whole life. And you could see his face light up when we'd bring the dog over so he
Yeah.
could visit. Oh, and that was that way with Mark too. My son is whenever he was really dysregulated, before things escalate, our sheepdog, old English sheepdog, he's
Mhm.
fairly tall and fairly heavy,
Yeah.
would try to
Deep
comfort him.
pressure. Deep
Deep
pressure.
pressure, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, let me give you a full body
Yeah.
hug. Here's my paws on your shoulder. Let me look you in the face and we'll see how you're doing.
Yeah.
And the OES didn't know that they were benefiting our son in that way, but
Mhm.
that was a significant thing,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like a
and
weighted
and
blanket
and
that
that's
moves
why.
around.
Yeah, and it's warm and
Yeah,
if it's a cat, the purring in itself is regulating. There's studies that show that's how cats heal themselves physically is
yeah,
the vibration, the frequency of vibration of a purr is metabolically healing and physically healing. It's how cats heal their broken bones out in the wild.
yeah. I can see
Um,
that.
yeah. So there's just so much, but that's why now there are companies that are training dogs for FASD work. I've had 2 episodes on that. An organization in the UK and an organization here in the States. Yeah.
Well, we need more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like any therapy animal. You can train a dog to do a lot of things, and
Mhm.
sometimes the biggest thing they can do is offer empathy from themselves
Yeah.
just by being there.
Yeah. Well,
So
my friend, we've been going at it for over an hour at this point.
I'm not sure we talked about aging enough. I think we should come back and do it again.
Yeah, and so you are on the ALC, so there's your
Yes.
challenge. I have laid down the gauntlet, my friend. You guys need to figure out how you're gonna pick those threads up so we can get back to weaving our tapestry about what are we learning about the relationship between FASD and the handful of comorbid conditions that researchers have picked up to run with.
Well, one of the things I did in Seattle is I got to go to the FADU.
Yes.
Sounds like some, NCIS or CIS, or CSI Las Vegas episode, but it's FADU, Fetal Alcohol Diagnostic Unit, at the
Yeah.
University of Washington. And I'm part of a middle-aged cohort where they're studying health outcomes, genetics, everything. So
We need one
it'll
of
be,
those here in North Dakota.
we do. Yeah. And, that was interesting too. One of the directors from the FAS Center at UND, our diagnostic center, was at Seattle. And she came
Really?
up and tapped me on the shoulder. And I didn't expect to see you here. And I'm like, are you live or are you memories? But they are
It's
accepting
a
appointments,
hologram.
and they're booking out a year at a time
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
The other diagnostic center that's currently in existence is private clinic, and they're booking out so far that they stopped accepting new appointments. It's 3
Yeah.
years. So we're actually trying to establish a third diagnostic center in the central part of the state in the Bismarck area.
Okay.
So I'll keep you in the loop on that. But
Yeah. Yeah, for
it's,
sure.
it's phenomenal that awareness is happening. It's not as happening as fast as I would like, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because people
Yeah.
need to study it and
Yeah.
learn more about it before they jump in
Yeah.
with both feet.
We need to tag team this state.
Yes, we do.
We really do. And it's funny. One of the other things that I really appreciate about so many of our population who's learning as adults that they have this condition is that once you learn about FASD, there's no going back. There's no
No,
unringing the bell, and you are
no.
forever changed. And by and large, we tend to pay it forward with we all seem to like step immediately into the advocacy role.
Correct.
And, because I had 3 surgeries over the July, August, and September last year. And for all 3 of those, I talked about FASD to everyone that would listen, even on the operating table until the minute the propofol put me out.
Yeah.
I'm educating people about FASD.
Yeah.
It's
every
just-
time I go to my doctors, I talk about it.
Yeah. I give out copies of my book every time I go to a doctor's office.
Well,
I give
and I
them
still
a copy
find it
sip by sip.
bizarre that the person who knew the most about FASD out of my entire medical team was my dentist, and I didn't need to explain it to him. But once he found out that I had FASD, he said, well, that's why you have so much trouble with your teeth. And that's why you're missing half of your teeth. It's because the FASD is so hard on the enamel.
Missing as in they've fallen out or gone bad?
Gone bad and had to be pulled.
I never had 4 teeth. Not my wisdom teeth. I got my wisdom teeth in, but 4 regular teeth never existed.
Yeah. Yeah. So
good thing my teeth really would have been crooked.
Right?
Because my mouth is small.
Yeah. Oh,
it moves all the time, but it's small.
Well, and I used to hide my smile because you get self-conscious about missing teeth. People automatically assume you're a drug user. And mine is a medical reason for missing the teeth. And it's because my FASD destroys the enamel on. So, yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, my friend, let's
pick this up another
15.
time.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me.
Well, as ever, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And our conversations, because we can speak candidly and freely about something that a lot of people think should be hidden in a closet.
Well,
and we can't hide us in the closet.
Yeah, I made that a conscious and deliberate choice when I wrote Sip by Sip, to be transparent and to be upfront and not to hide my life and the things that I've done. Do I provide every single detail? Well, no, but
No.
I only hold back the things that really are no one's business.
Exactly. Same here.
But I share enough nonetheless that people can relate and decide to not judge themselves or judge their family members or judge other people anymore, because it's all a function of the disability.
The disability.
Yeah.
If we start to see symptoms instead of behaviors, it begins to change our outlook.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're still talking. So
I have to jump for another meeting anyway. So, but I wish you the best, and I look forward to our next talk.
Me too. We've got to circle back to cause and effect, because that was the original topic. So, all right.
I think we had a wide-ranging conversation today. So, be nice to focus again on just one thing instead of so many. But so many things impact aging. So, I better shut up now.
All right, my friend. We'll pick it back up another time, and bless you too.
Yes, you take care of yourself.
You too, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Living with FASD. Hopefully, this episode added to the breadth and depth of your knowledge about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and I hope that it also made you laugh along the way. Please email me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com if there are any comments you want to make, questions that you want to ask, topics you want me to cover, or people that you think would make a great guest for the show. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. By helping my podcast grow, you will be doing your part to help raise awareness and understanding about FASD, which is something we surely can agree needs to happen. I also wanted to remind you to look in the show notes if you would like to order a copy of my book, Sip by Sip, Candid Conversations with Adults Living with FASD. You can find the ordering link in the show notes, and it is now also available in large print if you find, like me, find that words tend to swim on the page if the font is too small. Also in the show notes, you will find a Calendly link, which is my e-calendar. If you want to reach out to me and talk about any coaching needs that you might have for you or someone in your family, or if you want to talk about training, if you want me to bring me into your community organization or the company that you work for, I'm happy to do trainings about FASD as well. So those things are available to you. And this time, as always, if there are links or books or whatever else that my guest has brought to the show, you'll find those links in the show notes as well. Anyway, that's a wrap for today. I hope that you have a good week, and we will see you next time on Living with FASD.